Sego, gonna go ka ungwatoro. How are you, my friends? I hope you are doing okay. And what kunu wadados, I greet you in our traditional language. That is saying that I am using the best thoughts of my mind with the best feelings of my heart and the best words that I can speak in the way I greet you, so that I greet you in peace, mutual respect, and friendship. I thank you. Today I've been asked to speak about our foods, or gakwa ogula, the many different foods we have and where they came from. And once again, anything that we ever received on this earth came as a gift and through ceremony and through understanding. It's what we call our version of the creation story, and how the earth began, how we ended up getting here as Haudenosaunee people. Haudenosaunee meaning the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and in 1722 the Tuscarora coming up from the south, making the 6 nations of Iroquois. But the original 5 nations of government were the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca, that established with the peacemaker the great law of peace. So let's get started. The first thing we have to understand is that where did our system of foods came from? And I remember hearing in the creation story that we had one of the women that first came to earth, that we call her Gajistagayo, that mature flowers, that she came down to the earth, and the animals that were existing at that time saw her fall through this hole in the sky. And our elders have many different stories about that. Some say she just fell, others say she was pushed by a husband in the sky world, Galuyage, that was not happy that she was doing things as she did, and she was digging at roots of this great tree of celestial light that was always burning up there. And so when she went to dig some roots and dug a hole, that he pushed her through it. And others say that she was grabbing roots and she ended up slipping and falling. So anyway, she began to fall down from the sky world, and the animals below, happening to see her, began to gather in council. And it was one of the first councils that existed, that was a holistic council where the animals each gathered together and spoke, speaking about how they would help this woman to land. And then as they watched her fall, as she got closer, they realized that she was pregnant. And so they realized, as a pregnant woman, she has to have a soft, safe place created for her to land on, so that her body is comfortable and doesn't get hurt or have any problems while she's down here. And so the animals got together thinking, what can we do? And the beaver spoke and said, well, if she falls down, I am a water animal and I can hold her on my tail while I swim around. And a couple of the other animals spoke up and said, well, yes, we recognize you are a strong swimmer, my brother, but that would get you very, very tired. And so then the otter, he spoke up, saying that I can swim very, very fast. I can go down to the bottom of the ocean and find some dirt and bring that dirt up so that we can create some land, what we call land. And then she would have a nice place to land. And then the animals spoke for quite a while, and they were having a difficult time making conversation. And each of these, the beaver and the otter, dove down into the waters to get some soil. And after they were gone, some say hours, some say it was days, some say it was months, but it was a long time. And their bodies floated back up where they had passed away. And at that point in time, then the others recognized that they could not get it. All of a sudden, they heard this tiny little squeaky voice way in the back somewhere say, I'll dive down and get this earth. And when they looked and the crowd cleared to where this one with the voice could come through, they saw it was a tiny little muskrat. And they laughed thinking, oh, he's so weak and pitiful looking, this one. Well, he's all we've got left, let him try. So the muskrat dove down, and they say he was gone for an even longer time. And finally they saw his body floating up, and they realized that he was not alive anymore, and they picked him up, and when they looked at him, they realized that he had some of this soil in his hands. And so then they put that soil on the turtle's back, along where they had put the bodies of these other two creatures. And land started forming. And Sky Woman, as she fell from the sky, she came down, and then they just had to decide who was going to fly up to get her. And the Canada geese at that time flew up to create a design in the sky shaped like a V, to where she could rest her arms on the back, and they slowly brought her to the earth. And so every fall and spring we have the Canada geese that still remind us that they helped to create in the creation of the world. And as she came down and was put upon the earth, she began to dance in a counterclockwise fashion. And our elders say that she danced and danced and danced in that direction, and sang one of the first songs that we sing in the Eotanunyok Ungwehuwe, the women's dance song. Is one of the first ceremony songs that we sing every time we get together for ceremonies, to recognize the gift of the women. And she danced and danced, and then came the day when she had her baby. She had a woman, and that girl, as soon as she was born, she explored many things and grew, and she became pregnant again. Her mother turned around and told her to be careful. And one day while she was out sleeping in the environment, spirit of the wind came along, they say, and he turned around and saw this woman, and he planted 2 arrows on her across her body. One had points on it with a flint, and the other one was just the empty arrow shaft. And this woman became pregnant. And the one thing she noticed is in her pregnancy, there were always this arguing and fighting going on. And she realized she had two twins that she was carrying. And I'm doing a very condensed version of this creation story because there's a lot to it. But then the twins began to argue over who was going to be born first. And the good twin, that would be named Taluyawago, the one who holds the heavens, represented by our right arm, came down and was born the natural way. But the other twin, Tawiskalu, the negative twin, turned around and decided he should be born at the same time, so he came out through his mother's side, under her armpit. And as he did that, it killed his mother. And so, again, making the story short, she was buried, and the twins noticed from her body came these foods. From her breast came what we call oneste, the corn. From her fingers came what we call the beans. From her stomach area came what we call the squash. And then these are the 3 things that we call Jonhekwa, the 3 sisters. And then she also had strawberries that grew around her body, and from her tobacco sprouted the Oyengweonwe, the traditional tobacco. And there's some that even say from her toes came Ungwehuwe potatoes that we refer to today as Jerusalem artichokes. And we were taught that these would be the foodstuffs for our people to eat. And so this is the way that we're told that life on earth began, over the power of the women doing their work in a good way. And so then we recognize that the two twins were always at odds with each other, and it's very much like we see with the Chinese people with a yin-yang design, the Korean with an yang design, and our people with the day and with the night, that they balance each other out and make up one full time period. And then our people began to learn how to plant, and this agriculture that they had, where they planted these plants in companion planting, so that when they planted, they built a mound representing their mother, the earth. This girl had been referred to as Yetenestua Owenjate, our mother, the earth. And they planted a mound, prepared a mound, and right in the center of the top of that mound, they planted the Oyengweunwe, to always remind us that our minds have to constantly be given to giving thanks back to the Creator. And then from around that center pile of tobacco, Indian tobacco, there were 4 corn beans spread in each of the directions, and they were allowed to grow for a period of time, and then around them each corn stalk was planted 4 beans, so that the beans could turn around and use the corn to support them as they grew and got taller, and they would in turn give back nitrogen into the soil to look after the corn, so that it grew in a very healthy manner. And then around the bottom of the hill in the 4 directions were squash plants, because it was understood that there were animals that liked the corn and the beans, but they didn't like walking on the squash vines, usually the raccoons and other ones like that. And so then by the vines growing around the hill, all the plants were taking care of each other and looking after each other. And we were taught that with this happening in the garden, that's the way we are to be as well, that we always need to look after and take care of each other. And so one of the things I was taught when I was young and growing up was that when you plant a garden, again, one of the things we would do is go out and look for the May apple. And we would take that May apple and make a medicine out of it and put our seeds in it. And then when we turned around and planted the seeds, that May apple would protect those plants growing in the garden. And we gave thanks as well for that we grew many different styles of corn, many different types of beans, many types of vegetables and fruits and things of this nature that we enjoyed upon the earth. And we gave thanks that one of the things I was taught, when we plant a garden, we plant in 4s, just like the 4 directions. That one part of our garden is always going to be used to take care of those elders that are no longer able to plant gardens or work in the gardens, so that they would have fresh vegetables and fresh food to eat at all points and times. And then the next, the next quarter of the garden was planted for those animals, to always give something back to the environment so that those animals can continue to eat. And then the next section of garden that we were taught to plant was so that we would have plants for the next year, so that we always had our original heritage seeds, as we call them today, that we would have seeds to grow our gardens for the next year. And then the final quarter of the garden, we were allowed to take that food for ourselves and to use it appropriately. And one of the things we always did when we walked into the garden was to offer thanks that we were allowed to come into the garden and the plants would accept us and work with us. And then one of the interesting things about Iroquoian gardening that I used to get in trouble from some people because we never turned around and weeded a garden totally to where the plants just stood all by themselves. But we used the things that were called weeds in the garden to help keep the garden moist. So usually around the plants, we found that some of these plants, we allowed these weeds to grow a bit so that there would always be moisture to help them to grow. And that's the way we looked after our gardens. And then we had that ceremony in the fall when it was time to pick our medicines and harvest them and prepare everything so that we would have food for the winter, food for the next spring. And most of our food that we had, we got from the garden and used it and preserved it. And throughout the year then, we also had our people that we hunted food. One of the things we were given a long time ago at the time of creation was the understanding that the deer was given to us to always use for food and nurturing. And then our chiefs, Loyane, those of the good mind, always had the deer antlers put on their gastoa. If you see my other video that was done, I'm wearing a gastoa there with the eagle feathers and the split turkey feathers as well. And that's a whole nother set of stories. And in that way then, the deer was one of the main foods. We always called the deer the leader. And if anybody, when we talked about medicines, we went to their house to look after them and take care of them, we had a certain way that one of the things that we always presented was a dish of what we call our corn soup. The next dish we had was one of the things that we referred to as our deer meat. The next thing that we had was what we refer to as our fruits or berries. And then the next thing we had was a container full of good pure water. And one of the things I found when I worked with Winnipeg Regional Health Authority in the hospitals was that the Canadian Food Guide was not very helpful to our people because it contained a lot of milk, it contained a lot of wheat and things of that nature. And our original food guide for us was that first of all we had to have clean pure water. Secondly, we ate our vegetables from the garden. And then third, we ate the meats from the animals that we hunted. And then the fourth was, again, let's see, we had the water, we had the meats, we had also the fish and the breads that were made so that we could eat in a healthy way. And there was no wheat and there was no milk that was used in these things. And most of our people, because they were lactose intolerant. And so we give thanks that one of the ways we were taught that our people should work together to help each other came from the garden. And the way these three vegetables, specifically oneste, ozaheda, and ononuzala, the corn beans and squash, should work together to help each other to grow. And that's the way we learn. One of the things I liked growing up was whenever I had spare time or was feeling a little bored, my grandpa had my own special hoe. And he would tell me, you know, you go out there and you hoe the garden. And nothing I like better than getting out in a cornfield with my hoe and sitting in amongst the corn and feeling the energy growing there as I hoed away some of the weeds that were in the center of the row. And so with that, we learned the importance of helping each other, sharing food. One of the things we were taught that if you are ever at your home and all of a sudden you look out in the yard and you see that somebody is sitting in your driveway and is going to visit, because in our way, when you go to visit, you would go to somebody's driveway and wait for a few minutes so whatever they were doing in the house, they could finish up so that they could invite you in. And one of the things we were taught was Iroquois hospitality, that when people come to our door and we were serving food, we never took the food and hid it waiting till they were gone, and then we would eat again. We were always taught that when people come, if there's 6 of us eating, we just put some more plates on the table and share the food that we have. That was part of Iroquois hospitality. Second thing was that we offered them a drink of water. So we've not only offered them meat or food to eat, but we've offered them water to drink. And then third, that if they were tired, we offer them a place where they can take some time and rest or sleep. And we were told always, you offer the best in the house, your best bed for these people to relax. And then when they're ready to leave, that you do what you can to help them prepare to leave, either by giving them more food, or nowadays a lot of times it's just giving them a few more dollars so they can travel down the road and pay for gas or whatever. And that was Iroquois hospitality, that you could always find a place to stay with your relatives, and even people that you weren't related to, but they might be of the same clan. And I remember when I lived in Manitoba, on the end of my house, I had a white sign with a black wolf's head in there. And people that saw it knew they could come and stay there. And it would be like the Hotel Ritz, I think. Anyways, they could come. And with the work I used to do funerals for our people. And I found in some cases, a couple funerals I did, that the people, because of the death had been tragic death, that they were having a difficult time staying at their house, so they stayed at our place. Sometimes, I remember one, the longest, for about 6 months. They stayed there and they moved in, and we didn't charge them. All we asked them to do was, you're part of our family now while you are healing and returning to that life of good health and well-being, and just fit in and be part of the family. Help us in preparing food, and preparing groceries, cleaning the house, whatever you want. And that's the way it always went, with no charge. Not charging them, like I found many, many times with non-native people when I worked with Native ministries and I traveled, that I would either be given what they call billeting, where you go stay with a family, or I'd be told, go to stay at a hotel. Go to stay at a hotel, because this is where our family lives, and you're not part of our family, so you can just live down the road at this hotel. And so they never understood this concept of hospitality that we looked for among what should continue among brothers and sisters. And so we have a lot of our people that we grow our own tobacco. We don't grow, we see all of this tobacco being grown now on our territories, and people selling it to sell commercial, make cigarettes and cigars and whatever, commercial business. And most of us who still follow the old traditional ways just grow our own tobacco, oyengwe, and we harvest that tobacco and we use it only for ceremonies, and it's used as a sacred piece to help us speak to the Creator. And I remember once my son asked me, Dad, do you think the Creator can really hear us? And I said, well, let me show you something. And I took some of this oyengwe and I put it over the fire and crushed it up a little bit. And the smoke, he saw the smoke rise. And I said, did you see that smoke rise? He said, yes. And did you hear my words when that smoke rose? Yes, I did. Well, don't you think the Creator sees that and hears that as well? Oh, I guess they do. And with some of our other brothers and sisters, rather than using a fire, they used and put the fire inside of a pipe, a container, to where then they did the 7 directions offering thanksgiving. They went to the east, to the north, to the west, to the south. Then they went up to the sky, down to the earth, and the last direction was to themselves, that they give thanks for all these good things. So we have different ways that the foods have always maintained our people. And one of the things we are very thankful for is the stories that we tell all throughout the year, where we use the food as food. We used it to create crafts. Like there's stories about the little no-face doll that was created from corn husks. and we used certain types of squash as rattles, and so we found use for everything. And again, I could say a lot more, but I'm going to finish off and say Nyawagoa, that you came here today and spent this time with me, and I thank you very much for paying attention. Nyawagoa, Tanu Nyawa, Nyawa.